Hello, and welcome to SimTekTutorials. My name is Charles Smith, and today we're going over understanding and configuring IP. I'll be using examples from Microsoft 70-642 exam prep book, and as I'm working through the exercises, I'll be explaining what I'm doing and the hows and whys as it may pertain to a business network. As you can see, I have a couple of exercises already outlined here for us, but to taking a look at number 1, we're going to be logging on to DC Server 1 as an administrator and using the ipconfig command to verify our current IP address. Let's go and take a look at that now. Okay, so we're over here on DC Server 1 and we're logged in as the administrator. And the first thing we need to do is open up a command prompt. So what you do is you come down to Start, up to Command Prompt, right click, and run as administrator. Now for ipconfig, you can just open up command prompt as a regular user privileges, but for command prompt, I usually try to always open it as administrator. Sometimes you'll open it up just for something real simple, such as an ipconfig, and before you know it, you're troubleshooting and you're entering in commands, and they require administrative privileges. And you got to the certain directory, and then you like, oh, I got to open it up in as an administrator and go back to that directory. So for me, I always open up as administrator. Okay, so if you have your command prompt open, the command is just ipconfig. Enter. Now, ipconfig basically shows you the IP information for each connection associated with that machine, and this is actually a virtual machine, so you'll see a couple of other tunnel adapters and things like that you may not normally see on just a physical computer. And I actually do have two real local area connections. I have one directly connected to my network, which you can see IP version 4 address 10.0.0.12. And like I said, this is a virtual machine, so I have another network card installed, but it's not connected to anything. And because of that, you can see I got an auto configuration IP version 4 address of 169.254.113.182. And you really want to pay special attention to IP addresses of this type, this 169.254. That's a Windows, like it says, automatically configured IP. It's known as a PIPA address, automatic IP. What is it? A PIPA, automatic private IP addressing. That's what it is. Private IP addressing. What this means is because it has a network card, but it doesn't have a static IP, and it doesn't have one assigned to it from a DHCP server. Windows said, okay, well, I'll just give myself this IP address, and if there are any other computers that are in the same boat as I am, where they don't have an IP address, but we're connected to the same switch and we're on the same subnet, we can still talk to each other. So that's what's represented in that number right there. And again, I'll get into a lot of these terms such as subnet and switch and this subnet mask right here. All that'll be explained. I just wanted to show you guys where you can see your IP address via the command line. Okay, so in exercise 1 we looked at ipconfig command and the configuration on each adapter. Now let's look at exercise 2 and how to set a static IP address. So there's a bunch of different ways to do this. We'll do it how the book wants us to do it, and that's by using the ncpa.cpl command at the command prompt. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Alright, so we're back here at a command prompt, and we just enter in the command to open up network connections, which is ncpa.cpl. Enter. This will open up network connections, and you can see every connection that you have installed on your computer. As you remember from the ipconfig command, we found that I actually had two connections. One of them was connected to my public network, and the other one was still unassigned. And if I remember correctly, 2 was the one that was connected to the public network. So I'll edit number 1 for now to set a static IP. So we right click Properties. And to edit the IP version 4, we'll have to come down here to Internet Protocol version 4 and click Properties once more. And this is the window where we can actually set the IP address. As you can see here, there's two radio boxes. One is obtain an IP address automatically, and the other one is use the following IP address. Now what these basically could say is DHCP or static, and that's what they mean. Right now it's set up to obtain an IP address from a DHCP server. There isn't one yet on this network, so that's why it didn't have an IP address. We'll set a static IP address for now until we get a DHCP server up and running. I actually have to take a look back and see what the IP I remember. It was 192.168.0.2, and that's fine. I'll just set this for now. I don't think I need to. In fact, don't pay much attention to this, but normally a default gateway will be whatever is first in that network. So this is a 2, we'll make the gateway 1. Press OK, close. And now if we were to minimize this, to go back to our command prompt, and we were to run ipconfig, you see that I still have this connection for the public network, and now this one is an assigned IP address 192.168.0.2 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255. Now that we have an address assigned, we can move on to exercise 3, which looks at setting an alter configuration for your IP address. Now, defining an alter configuration, it may not be something you find yourself doing all too often. It's mainly for laptop users where they go from one network that uses DHCP to a network that uses static. You could use it for desktops also if you were anticipating your server going down and you knew that everybody was going to need a static IP address to function. But there's other fail-safes before doing this that would aid in that. But let's go ahead and define an alter configuration. Okay, so now exercise 3, defining an alter configuration. We need to go to Control Panel, and we're looking for Network and Sharing Center. To the left here, you can see manage network connections, diagnose and repair, connect to a network. What we need is manage network connections. As you can see, this takes us to the same spot as ncpl.cpl, or I'm sorry, ncpa.cpl. And we're going to go back into our local area connection, properties, Internet Protocol version 4, properties. This is again the same place where we defined our static IP address, only this time we're now going into advanced. As you can see, there's already one. This is the first IP address. This ends up being a list. The first one we already said will be first in the list, but we want to add a second one if this one wasn't available. So we click add. We're going to do 192.168.0.200, and the default subnet mask is just fine. Add. And as you can see, it's a list. If this one becomes unavailable, the computer will then use this one. If we didn't have, well, actually, let me click OK. If we were to have this set, obtain an IP address automatically, which would pull an address from a DHCP server, and we had an IP address set in here, there would only be one in the list, but this setting would still be first. Now I have to reset this. So in other words, it'll look for a DHCP server. If it can't find one, then it'll pull the next address, or the alternate configuration. That's why I say this is useful for laptops, because if, say, at home they use static IP addresses, but at work there's a DHCP server, they can set this to obtain an IP address automatically at home, and then have a alternate configuration, or I'm sorry, they can have this set for at work, and then when they go home they'll have an alternate configuration, and that will always allow them to have a connection wherever they are. Now these days almost everybody has either DHCP server, or your home router will have what's called a DHCP allocator. So you never really have to worry about setting a static IP address unless your environment particularly calls for it. Some people may argue that DHCP can be unsafe, that anybody could put their computer on the network and get an IP address. Not likely, but there's something to be said for that, and so they'll set up their whole networks where everything is static. Though it's also time consuming, it can help with organization also. If you know who has what IP address, you can have it all written down or stored in a file, as opposed to having a dynamic IP address where it could constantly change. If Bob had it on Monday, Jane could have it by Thursday. It really just depends whether or not you need to know that information, which usually you don't. There's things like DNS that we'll get into a little bit later, to where as long as you know the name of Bob's computer and Jane's computer, they're always accessible regardless of the IP address. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's how you set an alternate IP configuration. We'll close that and go ahead and take a look at exercise 4. Okay, now with exercise 4, we're going to be doing the same thing as in exercise 2 with setting a static IP address. The difference now is that instead of doing it using the GUI and opening up network connections, we're going to do it straight from the command line. We're actually going to use this command right here, net shell interface IP set address, the name of the connection, which in many cases will be local area connection. It could be local area connection 2, 3, 4, and then finish with static 192.168.0.2 and a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. And of course, we'll use our favorite ipconfig command to verify that IP address. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, I'm open to the command prompt here, and because we already set the IP address before using the GUI, and I want to show you guys now how to set the IP address static. Even if I did it with the command line, you wouldn't see the difference. So I went ahead and changed the IP address behind the scenes, just so you guys could see that when I did it with the command line, how it works, and that I didn't cheat or anything and it didn't work or anything like that. So as you can see, I just changed it to a random number of 124.52.129.2. Also notice the subnet mask. It's 255.255.0.0. Okay, so then I'll go in, run the command that changes the IP address back to what we set it before, and then I'll do another IP config and show you where it changed. Okay, so the command to set the IP address is netsh interface IP. And just to show you something, if you are never not too sure about a command, as long as you know, say you knew it was netsh but you weren't really sure, you can always put a /question mark at the end, and it'll show you a list of all the possible commands that come next. So like I said, there's also a description, so if you really weren't too sure, you could kind of read it. Sometimes it's more better explained, sorry. But you still get an idea. But the one we want in this case is interface, which makes sense because we're going to change afterwards to the IP interface. And then, again, we can do this for the next command, but we just want, IP, but it will default to IP version 4. And then I'll just finish the command, set address, and then we want the name of the actual connection, which is our local area connection, not local area connection 2. And it's going to be a static IP address, and it's going to be 192.168.0.2 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. Enter. Alright, you see what I went through. We'll do another IP config. And there it is. Here's the public one, but here's the one we just set. 192.168.0.2. Beautiful. Alright, so here we are. The final exercise. Exercise number 5. Enable file sharing. So you might be wondering why we would do this, especially right now in this lesson compared to the configuring IP and stuff like that. But there's actually a number of different reasons why we would enable file sharing right now. The main reason is because while we're still setting up the network, we need a couple different ways to check for connection. And so usually setting up a file share is a good way to prove that one computer can talk and communicate with another. There are also a couple of behind the scenes ways that you can do that as well, as with a ping test. You can ping another machine with its IP address and you'll get a reply if you can connect. Like I said, that's basically doing the same thing as a file share, just a file share in the long run is obviously more useful. But in order to do this ping test, we have to allow ICMP connections. By enabling file sharing, we're setting up the ports and the protocols in the firewall to allow the ICMP protocol, which will also then allow us to do a ping test. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'm over here on this client machine and I want to ping DC server 1. You know, I set everything up, I gave it a static IP address, it's on the network, I just want to do a ping test. So I type in ping, and I'm actually going to be using its public IP address, the one that was on local area connection 2, just because the machine that I'm using is also on the same network. I don't have another computer on the network. But for testing purposes, just go with me, please. I'm sorry, that was actually that IP address on the DC server is 12. I was wondering why we got a response. So as you can see, we'll just get these requests timed out. We're not getting a response back, and that's because, you know, we forgot file and printer sharing. So if we go over and just to confirm, we'll run an IP config. Say that we didn't know it was file and printer sharing. You're trying to troubleshoot this. You're going to say, well, why can't I get to that? It's 10.0.0.12. What did I miss? In fact, I'm actually not even too sure of this, but I'll ping the machine that I just pinged from. Whoops. Not bad. .2. Okay, so I will get a response. But so that might, for a lot of people, especially those of you experienced in the network field, you know, why can I ping from one computer but I can't ping back to it? And that's because of file and printer sharing is not enabled. So what we're going to do is just open up the firewall. There's a bunch of different ways to do this, by the way, but this is probably the most efficient. Just open up the regular Windows firewall, allow a program through Windows firewall. Oh, what's up with me? I can't save Windows tonight. And we're just going to enable file and printer sharing. We'll apply that. Okay. Let's come back out to the client machine, and there we have it. We now get a response back. Like I was saying earlier, that's because of the ICMP. I can actually show you that in the advanced firewall. I'll close out of this regular one, just so you guys can see what's going on behind the scenes. And you have your inbound and outbound rules. And if we come down here, it actually is great in how it describes and labels and names everything. As you can see, file and printer sharing, echo request, ICMP version 4 in, and it opens up a bunch of different things for file and printer sharing, things that are needed. That's why if you don't need file and printer sharing, it's a best practice just to turn it off. You don't want things open that you don't really need, allowing just another vulnerability on one of your machines. But especially in the case of servers, you do need it, and it's a nice convenience on client machines. And when I say vulnerability, I don't mean a huge vulnerability, but if there's a hole you can block, you might as well. So there you have it. Oh, also in outbound rules, there's also file and printer sharing, ICMP4 out. So we made it. All 5 exercises are done. Just to look back, in exercise 1, we learned how to use the ipconfig command to verify our current IP address. I may have not mentioned this earlier, but ipconfig will probably be your #1 used command in command prompt. It'll be your first command when you're troubleshooting a network issue, and you by far use it more than any other troubleshooting tool. Me and many others, they get on their computer, go right to a website, google.com, can't get it, straight to command prompt, find out whether or not you have an IP address and whether it looks right or not. Now I'll explain what that means in later videos, but after a while you can just tell whether or not the IP address assigned to your computer is one that is valid, whether it has the right subnet, mask. Earlier, as I was talking about a PIPA address, you can see whether or not you have that. There's so many things you can find just from typing ipconfig on why you might not have been able to get to Google. Now, it's not going to solve all your problems, but it can help you point you in the right direction. In exercise 2, we set a static IP address. We use ncpa.cpl to open up network connections, and then we went into the appropriate network adapter to assign our 192.168.0.2. Of course, we use ipconfig to verify that IP address. In exercise 3, we went ahead and defined an alternate configuration. As you remember, I said this is usually something that will only be done on laptops, and nowadays it's not even used that often. In the environment I work in, we never use it because most of the time the users that take their laptops home will have a means of getting an IP address without needing a static one, and we don't use static IP addresses in our environment. We also went ahead and configured the IP version 4 through the command prompt. Not a lot of people do it this way. They just go through the GUI. It's easier. Well, not easier, but you don't have to remember the command, in other words. If you could remember the command, this way is definitely the easier way. You don't have to click through OKs and yes and applies and properties. You know, depending on how fast you type, 10 seconds you could change the IP address. Command prompt, NetShell interface IP, set address. There you have it. In exercise 5, I explained how enabling file sharing can help you with setting up your network for the first time. It allows you to ping computers to verify connection, and it also obviously allows file sharing, which is an alternate way to ensure that you have communication between two computers. And I think that's it for today. I really appreciate you guys checking my video out. In the next video we're going to get further into understanding what an IP is, and we'll see what the bigger picture is. You know, we just looked at one computer with an IP address. hopefully I'll be able to explain some of the things that I may not have as well in this video. This was just a brief introduction. It's actually my first video. So subscribe if you want to see the upcoming videos. Like, rate, let me know what you guys think, how I can improve, what you might like to see. Shoot me an email if you need any help. Thanks, and this is SimTekTutorials.